Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Well, hello everyone, this is Kelly, and welcome back to In Her Voice. I'm so thankful and grateful to you that you chose to press play on this today. And it is a Sunday, and I am embarking on week 6 of the coronavirus pandemic quarantine. And up to this point, I've been sharing solo episodes with you because that is what it was really on my heart to share. And I, as you know, most of you know, I do all of my interviews way in advance, and I haven't done any interviews with the exception of the chat that I had with Stephanie Dodd a few weeks ago during this time. But as I was looking back through the interviews that I had recorded already, I found this interview with Agnes Wainman. She is a clinical psychologist, and she's fed up with how women have to deal with expectations. And as I was sitting with it and thinking with it, I thought, this is perfect. This is the perfect interview for right now, because despite the fact that that things are completely different from any other time in our life that we've ever experienced, really, we're putting a lot of expectations on ourselves to do quarantine a certain way, to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to be a certain way. And I'm not saying that all those ways are bad or wrong, but when we say to ourselves, I should be doing this instead of I desire to be doing this, that's going to lead us down a path that will not help us feel fulfilled. It will not help us feel good. It will not lead to alignment, all of these important things that I've been talking a lot about lately. So I'm excited to share this interview with you. It's Agnes Wainman. I do not have like a full-on bio for Agnes. I went back and looked through my notes and I could not find it. And I thought, you know what? Today, I am not going to let perfection take the place of good. And this interview is really good. So enjoy this conversation that I have with Agnes on how to screw expectations. Welcome, Agnes Wainman, to the In Her Voice podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, Kelly.
Yes, and we're talking about something that is a little bit racy.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say that? Do you think that that's true about what we're talking about today?
We can talk about it as being racy, disruptive, a little bit scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you guys ready? So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about how women need to start showing up and basically saying, screw expectations. Yes?
Yes.
So let's start sort of at the beginning, because I'm guessing that you haven't always said screw expectations.
No.
So where did this come from for you?
So I was a very shy, timid child. I was the kid who always had stomach aches in the morning before school. I was always feeling like I didn't quite fit in, just not good enough, which I know is a very common feeling for lots of women, unfortunately. And then I ended up in graduate school doing my master's and PhD in clinical psychology. And when people asked me at that time, why did you go into clinical psychology? I had that, well, I want to help people. But it turns out that I actually had a lot of my own stuff to work through, and it was just easier to do a DIY model than spend years in therapy.
I feel like there's some expectations wrapped up right in that statement too.
Yes, because I think when we look at people who are psychologists and therapists, there's an expectation that we all have our stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
But being in this field now for over a decade, let me tell you that so many of us, at least the ones that, are aware, is that we're just like humans with our own stuff, with our own issues. And I think there's a reason why we're called to this work. And that reason is at first we want to figure out our own stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would believe that.
Yes. And then once I finished graduate school, I worked in a few other private practices, and then I started my own. And as you know, in the business development space, we're always talking about, who do we want to work with? Who is our ideal client? What is our niche? And I landed on my niche as overwhelmed, worried women. And I love overwhelmed, worried women. I consider myself part of that pack, although I feel I've done a lot of my own growth, so I'm not as worried and not as overwhelmed. And over the years, as I've worked with women, I've realized that as much as I was trained in here's disorders, here's what's wrong with people, this is how you treat individuals. And as I started working with all of these amazing, wonderful women, I started to realize that there was actually nothing wrong with them. It was that they were trying to meet all of these unrealistic expectations that had been placed on them by society, their families, themselves. So one day in the shower, where I kind of have all of my best ideas, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, we need to just say screw expectations. These are making us sick, miserable, and fed up. So that's how Screw Expectations was born.
I love it. And I get good ideas in the showers too. So what are some of the common expectations that you see women dealing with that creates this syndrome, if you will, of feeling overwhelmed and worried all of the time?
So I group the common expectations into three realms that all have a lot of overlap. So, first, they have a lot of expectations of themselves, and that can be about expectations about how they should feel or what they feel is wrong. So, a lot of times, women will be sitting in my therapy office, a place where we should be able to feel it all, and they will apologize for crying because they expect for themselves that they shouldn't be babies or shouldn't be upset or that there's something wrong with them. Women also expect so much of themselves in terms of their body image, their appearance, what they should be doing all of the time. So there's this whole checklist that they feel like they're constantly going through about themselves and never feel like they're meeting it.
Mm-hmm.
The second category of expectations that I find women really struggle with is expectations in their relationships. So their relationships with their partners, with their families, with their friends. And the women I typically work with, while they expect so much of themselves, often don't expect enough of other people in their lives. They kind of try to do everything on their own because they don't want to bother other people or they don't want to burden other people or they feel like they're being needy in their relationships. So I do a lot of work with them around relationships and what those relationships should be looking like to be healthy and supportive for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, kind of this last group of expectations is the expectations that I kind of call cultural and societal expectations. So expectations about work, expectations about education, this idea that if we don't learn how to do things in childhood, then it's just way too late for us to learn anything new. And then also just societal expectations around sexism and racism and ableism. So how do we navigate all of these expectations? And as I say, there's all of this overlap between the expectations we have of ourselves, our relationships, and society and culture.
Mm-hmm. I think that this rings true. I know in my own experience, and also in talking with the women that I work with and the women that coach with me and the women that I'm friends with. It's this feeling that we're always falling short, like forever falling short. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and we were talking about being nice. And I said, sometimes I feel like even if I have that, I shouldn't even have mean thoughts about people, as if I could control that, like our thoughts are our thoughts. But like when I have a mean thought, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be having that thought. What does that say about me that I'm even having that thought? And I think that is just, a tiny example of how perfect we feel like we should be as we're walking this earth, because what happens if we're not that? I mean, what do you think is the thought behind it? Like that we have to live up to these expectations, because if we don't, what happens?
So at the core, as humans, we all want to belong. We all want to connect with other people. We want to be accepted. So, and very unconsciously. So one of the things that I want to teach women is that so many of these things are unconscious. It's not like we're getting up in the morning and saying, I'm going to put all of these expectations on myself today and, feel miserable because of that. It's these expectations that we've been breathing in from the moment we're born. Again, there's parts of these expectations that are ingrained in us because we are just human. But we've been sold so many lies about what it actually takes to have those authentic, connected relationships. So that idea of, yes, if we're nice, if we don't judge other people, if we're agreeable, if we always say yes, then maybe we will be accepted and loved and not get kicked out of the tribe.
And then we do that, and then we resent it. At least that's my experience.
Yes, it's I would say it's probably everyone's experience, because that's actually not what relationships are for. Our relationships with other people, whether it's with our partners, with our friends, with our families, is to connect on an emotional level, to feel safe with those people, but not necessarily ignoring our own needs and trying to meet the needs of those people all of the time.
So, wow, there's just so much here, and I could go many directions, but before I go in the direction that I really want to go, and I want to ask the question you said in the relationship realm, that you find women generally don't expect enough of others, of the people they're in relationship with. But then I feel, part of me is like, well, if I don't want people to expect things of me, can I expect things of other people? How do I manage that?
Well, and that's the thing. I'm definitely not saying that we need to get rid of all expectations, but we really need to be forming realistic expectations. So often, and in my practice, what I see in a lot of romantic relationships, in a lot of heterosexual romantic relationships, women aren't, they don't want to seem needy. They don't want to bother their partners with challenging feelings. They don't want to have difficult conversations with their partners because they don't want to hurt their partner's feelings. You know, they want to be nice.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
Versus actually setting an expectation that, look, and so there we're not expecting enough of our partners, but then we're expecting too much of ourselves by feeling that we need to do this on our own. That we should just be able to, you know, suck it up or move on or not address hard things. Versus if we lower the expectation for ourselves, like, no, actually, I do need that support. And increasing the expectation for our partner, like, no, my partner can handle this. Or they should be able to tolerate my distress. If they aren't, that's a whole other problem that we have now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really about adjusting expectations in different directions so we're actually allowing that connection to happen.
I like that, and I have to say I'm an optimist, and my expectations of others tend to skew unrealistic in the wrong, like in the direction of like they will be able to do everything that I think. And I think that's also like, that's just, I think it's something to point out. Like, I can't expect my husband to read my mind.
Yeah.
And so that is unrealistic. And if I read, 10 romance novels where the man can, intuit every single thing that the woman needs, that's not real. So, I think that it's good to point out that is a spectrum that can swing both ways.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And I think particularly for romantic relationships, that our models for romantic relationships are Disney movies,
Right.
rom-coms. And then often for most of us, we were first exposed to maybe our parents' relationships, which may have not been great models, or even if they were great models, we may have not known the ins and outs of their relationships. So really a lot of times we don't know what we're doing in relationships.
Right.
And that's why even just voicing expectations or telling our partners, like, I'm not actually sure what you need from me in this moment, while way less sexy than what we see in the movies, again, leads us to connection.
Yeah, I agree. I'm about to celebrate my 20th anniversary of my marriage, which is very exciting.
It is very happy anniversary.
Thank you. And one of the things that I've learned, and it's still, interestingly enough, I know it like intellectually, it's still really hard for me to embody. And that is to ask for what I need. And I know that when I ask my husband for what I need, he will give it to me. But I can't expect him to know that if I don't ask him, And sometimes he does know, because we've been married a long time. But really, if I really need something, I need to ask him. And it seems so simple, but yet it's taken me 20 years to figure it out. So I think that's really interesting. But setting the relationships aside, I think what's even more fascinating about this is the expectations that we put onto ourselves. And I want to talk about ways that we can literally say, screw these expectations. I mean, what are the steps that we can take to begin to reclaim some version of ourselves that feels real and true to who we are?
Yeah, so there's a few things I want to unpack there. So I think, most or every woman that I work with will first say, I'm the one who put these expectations on myself. No one else has. It's just me. I expect a lot of myself, which may be very true now. However, those expectations were typically kind of, again, subconsciously ingrained in us. So the messages we get from our families, the messages we get in school, the messages we get from advertising, that we are breathing in these expectations really from day one. You know, the moment you're born, people are placing expectations on you, whether it's based on your gender, whether it's based on your birth order, whether it's based on, you know, even your birth story. You know, that if you had a dramatic birth, that you're going to be a troublemaker.
Right.
So I think first acknowledging that a lot of these expectations that feel like they are ours may not actually be ours. So I think starting to develop an awareness when you're feeling maybe overwhelmed, when you're feeling stressed out, when you're feeling that something's not quite right, first maybe asking yourself, what expectation am I trying to meet here? And it may not immediately come to you because, again, there's so many layers and so many messages that we take in. But for example, you know, say your child's school is having a bake sale and you don't bake. But, you know, you pick your child up at school and you run into one of the PTA parents and they're like, hey, can you bring 100 cupcakes tomorrow? And your immediate response is like, sure, I will bring 100 cupcakes tomorrow. And then you get home and you're standing in your kitchen and you're realizing, like, what have I just gotten myself into?
Yeah.
So then asking yourself, what expectation was I trying to meet by saying yes? Was it the expectation that I can't say no to other people? That in order for me to be liked, I need to say yes to things? Maybe I'm trying to meet an expectation that to be the perfect parent, that I have to show up with 100 cupcakes. So the same behavior, you know, from person to person may vary in terms of what expectations they're trying to meet.
Right. Yeah. So once we start to bring that awareness to the expectations themselves, what do we do next?
So then we hopefully will identify the expectation that we're trying to meet. And then this also does, the next step takes a little bit of pre-work as well, is because you need to have a vision of what you want your life to look like, what you want your relationships to look like, what you value, what is important in your life. And does this expectation, or me trying to meet this expectation the way I currently am, does this align with that vision? So if our overwhelmed mom standing in the kitchen, if she had a vision for her life that, you know, she wanted a lot of time with her child and she values a few very important relationships, and she's okay if strangers, you know, are mad at her for saying no, then she is not living, by saying yes to the request, she's not aligned with how she wants to live her life.
I love the word aligned so much. That's something that I use a lot in my own teaching and coaching. And I think it's important to talk about what not feeling aligned feels like. Because I would guess the majority of women think that that's normal. So can you talk about what that doesn't, like what not being aligned feels like?
So, this is such a great question because it really highlights, you know, when we become disconnected from ourselves when we become disconnected from our own inner voice, when we become disconnected from our intuition, our gut. So when we're not aligned with those, when we're not aligned with our own inner wisdom, it feels, it can feel like anxiety. It can feel like panic and overwhelm. It can feel like exhaustion. So a lot of the women that I work with just are tired because it's constantly doing things that are energetically draining rather than energetically giving.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the energy piece can also sometimes be a sign whether we're living our lives in alignment or not. Because there's going to be women who baking 100 cupcakes, that will give them energy.
Right.
Because
yeah. I know women like that.
Yeah, because that is totally aligned with how they want to live their life of nourishing others and creating something. And to them, it brings them joy and brings them energy. Whereas for myself,
Thanks, but no.
no. It would be energy draining. I would be resentful.
Yeah.
I would be angry.
And yes, I have been all of those things because I said yes to something that I didn't really want to do. And I get mad at I get mad at other people before I actually start to really understand that it's me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's me that made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's me that chose not in alignment with
Mm-hmm.
what my soul really desires.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to take that responsibility, it feels very powerful, I find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love, that we're talking about anger because often there's an expectation that anger is this negative emotion and we shouldn't be angry. We're just like every other feeling, anger is data. Anger is information. And the feeling anger is separate from angry behaviors.
I love that.
Yeah, so often we think of anger as destructive, breaking things, flipping someone off in the car, whereas, sure, yeah, we probably don't want to engage in destructive behaviors, destructive for us, destructive for other people. But anger as a feeling, that is an indication that either something has happened to us that is not okay, maybe from someone else, or absolutely, as you say, we have crossed our own boundary.
Mm.
And
I just feel like, okay, now we have to have another podcast episode to talk about that one. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to say this again because I feel like it's really important to make this distinction.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling of anger is separate from angry behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's really, really valuable because it gives us permission as women to feel angry.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's okay. Because like you say, when you see it as data and you start to get curious and ask the right questions about where that anger is coming from, then you can go forth with more clarity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so again, if we set the expectation for ourselves that anger is bad, anger is wrong, anger is not being nice, then we disconnect ourselves from this really important part of our emotional system.
Yeah.
And when we look at so many, justice movements and grassroots movements, a lot of those were started because of anger.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that anger was transformed into something positive, something that grows something, that builds something. So again, it's not destructive anger.
Mm-hmm. And you know what comes to mind as we talk about this anger is that, like, we as women can be angry that we've been spoon-fed these expectations since the moment we were born. Like, I'm mad about that. I'm mad that it's still happening. And what am I going to do about that? And I think it starts with numero uno, right?
Absolutely.
It starts with you saying, screw it. I'm not going to abide by that anymore. I'm not going to tolerate doing something in my life because that I'm expected to if it doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah. And so which expectations each woman takes on is going to, differ.
Right.
And it can be seemingly small things. So Kelly, I know you might resonate with this one because I've noticed that you have, beautiful gray hair.
Right.
And this year I started growing out my gray. And I was stunned because I've fallen down, the Instagram grand bray and Facebook groups about letting out your gray, and how terrifying something, what should be relatively minor. It's like, yeah, I'm just not going to dye my hair anymore.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. So and there's like literally memoirs that women have written about growing gray and what that has meant in their life, because it's this expectation that has been placed on us. Like, don't you dare, like, God forbid that you show that you are aging.
Right.
Or it's not even like some women go gray in their 20s. It's not even about aging necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can decide for ourselves, and it may seem like this minor thing to be saying like, screw it, but it really is standing up against certain expectations.
And I love this too, in that as we do this, I think sometimes there's a feeling that if you're going to stand up for something, that everyone needs to be on your bandwagon, so to speak. And I love that as we stand up for our own expectations that we're screwing, that we're saying, no, thank you, we can also respect other women's decision to do different. Like, I can respect the woman who's going to make the 100 cupcakes.
Yeah.
Because we need her. Like, I want the people who love making cupcakes.
Yeah, I love cupcakes.
Because I don't want to do it. Right. But there's another piece to this that I want to highlight a little bit, because it's something that comes up for me, because I have done a lot of work around this personally, and there's still work to be done. But the thing that comes up for me is I can say no to the PTA. I can say no to the booster club. I can say I don't want to volunteer at the school. I'm really good at saying no. What I'm not good at yet is not feeling guilty about that.
Oh, I love guilt.
Okay, well, let's have it. What do we do with that?
So, and again, guilt is absolutely something that is weaponized and used against women.
Say that again.
So guilt, it has been weaponized and used against women. So just like anger, guilt has its role. So guilt is our response that we've done something wrong. And there are things that we have all unanimously agreed are wrong. So don't murder someone. If you murder someone, feel guilty because you've done something wrong.
Okay.
So,
note taken.
So appropriate guilt. We also worry about people who don't feel guilty when they have crossed, very,
Right.
However, what happens is that we start defining things as wrong for ourselves, or other people start defining things as wrong for us. So for women, aging, that's wrong. being in, a larger body than a size 6, that's wrong. Feel guilty. You know, disappointing someone, oh, that's wrong. Feel guilty. So there are all of these definitions of what is wrong floating around. And again, we breathe them in and we internalize them. So when we start feeling that guilt, then now's the time to step back and say, okay, I feel the guilt. So I feel like I'm doing something wrong. What am I feeling that I've done wrong? And who has defined that as wrong for me?
Oh, Agnes. That's a good one. You're very good at this. So what am I feeling I've done wrong, right? And then who has said that that's wrong? Wow. Okay, I hope everybody's writing this down. I'm writing it down. I've already taken 2 pages of notes. I'm running out of room. Who said that was wrong? I think that is the most interesting question, because that's when we can begin to untangle beliefs about who we are and who we have to be.
Yeah. And you may not even be able to think of a specific person. It's just kind of this, and that's another thing about the expectations, is we don't think about, like, where did this stuff come from?
Right.
Like, who decided that, disappointing other people, which is just a natural part of human relationships, because we're never going to meet everyone's needs, and all of our needs are never going to get met either. And that's okay. That's just being human. So who put it out there that disappointing other people is wrong? And that's, again, a whole other discussion where we go into, how society has been structured, patriarchal societies, wanting to disempower women. But again, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. Man, this is deep. Well, and I think one thing that I remind myself, so when I ask this question, who was it that told me that was wrong? That's not the person who necessarily made it wrong.
No.
Right? So if I say, my mom used to say, good girls don't brag about themselves, which I took on in my own psyche to mean I can't be proud of myself for the things that I do. So my mom was the one who said that, but somebody taught her that, and somebody taught her that, and somebody taught her that.
Yep.
So this is not about a cycle of blaming your parents or blaming somebody else, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So in my work with women, we do a ton of family of origin work. These are our first relationships. This is where we get our first messaging. And I'm always very clear, this is not the stereotypical, you lie on the couch and blame everything on your parents. Because parents are human beings who have their own stuff, their own issues, their own histories, their own generational ways of looking at things, often with their own trauma.
Right.
And so just like we've been breathing in all of these expectations, they've been breathing in the expectations. And, and again, I love I can talk all day about the differences between like boomers and Gen Xers and millennials, because I find it so fascinating, though, that the expectations that we've been breathing in have changed and shifted over generations. But we're trying to apply, parents are trying to apply their expectations on their kids, and kids are rebelling. And again, that's part of being human. So it's absolutely not about blame. And I think going back to your point that, our expectations for ourselves are going to be different than our neighbors and our sisters and our friends. And there's room for all of us. And we need so much grace and compassion for each other, because we're all navigating, figuring this stuff out, and all of our paths are going to look slightly different.
Yeah. And when we can can give grace to others, it then becomes easier to give grace to ourselves too. I really believe that. Agnes, what a beautiful conversation. I feel like we could go double this, so I might have to have you back
I'm
because
happy to come back.
I want to talk about boundaries. I want to talk about generations. So why don't you let my listeners know how they can connect with you online, how they can learn more about what you're doing in the space that you're creating to help women screw expectations.
Sure. So in terms of Screw Expectations, I'm mostly hanging out on Instagram, which I'm still getting the hang of.
You're doing great over there, I would say.
So my username there is Screw Expectations. I also have a website, screwexpectations.com. It's a little bit more quiet over there, so Instagram is probably the best place to connect. And I just share my thoughts there. Yeah, and really, this is a movement. This is not, I have nothing to sell people. I have nothing to, I'm not offering anything other than here's what I've learned over the years, and I want to share it because this so lights me up and it's such a passion for me. And I want your listeners to come join our movement, and I would love to hear what expectations they will be screwing in their life.
I can't wait. You guys be sure to tag both of us at Kelly J. Covert and at Screw Expectations. Let us know what expectations you plan on screwing in the very near future, because that's going to make us both super, super happy. So Agnes, I like to always ask my guests what your inner voice has been saying to you lately besides screw expectations. That's obvious. But what else?
So, one of the things that I'm slowly doing more of is sharing some of my own personal story in the work that I'm doing. So, coming from a psychology background, we are very much trained to not do any self-disclosure, not to share things and I totally see that in a clinical setting that, we want our focus to be about the clients, but I'm finding that sharing my own story and my humanity is so much more powerful than just sticking with this in a theoretical realm. So over at Screw Expectations, I am starting to share a little bit more of my own story about, things that have happened in my own family of origin and how I'm kind of rebelling against that, motherhood, relationships, because our stories are important. And I think I'm starting to realize that my story is important too. And that's I think the most important way that we're all going to screw expectations together is by sharing each other's stories. So I'm sharing, I'm taking off a little bit of that professional
veneer
and just
Yeah.
someone that we both know who helps with branding once described Screw Expectations as the rowdy cousin of my clinical practice.
Oh,
And I love that.
I love it. Yeah, I know who you're talking about too. Yeah, welcome to the coach's life where you can share everything. Agnes, I think that this is just beautiful, and I'm so thankful that you're following your inner voice's lead to share your story and to share what you're passionate about, because this is a true movement, and I do believe that it will change the world. So thank you so much for being here today.
I loved this conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm just going to say it again because I think it bears repeating. You do you right now. You need to check in with your inner voice. You need to ask yourself, what brings me into alignment today? Not what should I be doing? Those are two vastly different questions, and they will lead you to vastly different answers. And so this sort of gets at the point of make sure you're asking yourself the right questions. Because when we're not asking ourselves the powerful questions, we're not going to get the powerful answers. And if asking yourself questions and listening to your inner voice is something that doesn't feel like second nature to you yet, or it's something that you're not sure even how to begin, I would love to support you in that. This is what I do. I help women listen to their inner voice. I can help you find that alignment, find that connection to your deep inner wisdom. And it would be my great honor to support you in that. So if this is something that you're really feeling like you need in your life, that you need direction and support and guidance, I would encourage you to sign up for a deep dive inner voice session. These are 60 to 90 minute sessions, and I'm just doing them one at a time. It's just one session to start. And you would be amazed at how much we can uncover and discover and pull into the clear, wide opening in just an hour or an hour and a half. So if this is something that sounds like something that you need, give this as a gift to yourself right now. You can sign up for one of these one-on-one sessions on my website at kellycovert.com, or shoot me an email and we can connect, kelly@kellycovert.com. So as always, remember, we need you being you. You being someone else or doing someone else's thing, or feeling like you should be like someone else, is not doing anybody favors. It's not doing yourself a favor, and it's certainly not doing us any favors, because we need you. You are special. You are unique. You have special gifts that only you can bring. And you bring those when you show up daily as you. You are worthy.